Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Amtrak Board of Directors meetings. I'm Sam Dotson, the Chief of Police, and I'd like to do a brief safety briefing to get us started today. So we are located at 20 F Street. There are no emergency drills planned today, so any alarm that we hear, we will take seriously. The primary way to exit the building is the way that we came in. Secondary, through those doors, is a hallway which will take us to a loading dock, and we have APD officers on site to be able to assist. Bill, if you would lead the evacuation, we will do that. And Steve Fredmore, if you'd bring up the rear, we'd appreciate that. In the event of a medical emergency, there is an AED located near the elevators where we came in the fitness facility. An APD officer will retrieve the AED and bring it to us so we can use it. It's very important that we look around and make sure there are no impediments to our movements, cords, backpacks, and if you see something during the course of the meeting that does, please reach out to an Amtrak employee, and we will be happy to address that to make sure that we have free movement. Health and well-being is always very important, so please take time to make sure you get enough rest, address mental health, and take some time to recharge. We're all very, very busy, but it's very important that we take time to recharge. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, we have to talk about active shooter. In the event of an active shooter, the guidance is to run, to evacuate, to hide, shelter in place, and then to fight or defend. So if we have to run or evacuate, we'll use the exit routes that we talked through the front door or through the loading dock if the front door is not available. If we have to hide, we are in a good room to hide. We will put materials against the doors to keep people from being able to enter easily. And then certainly as a last resort, if we have to fight, we will fight as if for our lives because it is a life or death situation. There are 3 armed police officers with us today, so they will move towards the threat, and I would ask you to please take one of those routes to evacuate and to escape. Last thing I'll talk about is cybersecurity. In the world that we live in today is so interconnected, certainly in your workspace, but also in your private space. Emails and texts that don't look right, that ask you to click on links you're unfamiliar with to provide confidential or personal information. Please do not click on those, and in the workspace, forward those to our cybersecurity professionals so they can address them. Any questions about our security briefing today? Great. Then I would introduce Bill Herman, the General Counsel for Amtrak. Bill?
Thank you, Chief Dotson. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Amtrak Board of Directors to order. My name is William Herman. I am the Corporate Secretary, and today is May 22nd, 2025. And this is a duly noticed meeting of the Amtrak Board of Directors. First, I'm going to take the roll of the directors who are present. If I could just ask that you acknowledge your presence. Tony Kosha, Chair. Here. Joel Zabat, Vice Chair. Here. Stephen Bradbury, Deputy Secretary. Here. Mayor Chris Coos. Here. David Capozzi. Present. Elaine Clegg. Here. Lan Hee Chen. Here. And Ron Vittori was not able to attend today's meeting, but sends his regrets. So thank you. I confirm we have a quorum present for today's meeting. Mr. Chair, you may proceed with the scheduled agenda.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome to all the members of the public who are attending this meeting virtually. We have several items to discuss today, so let's begin with a review of today's agenda. We have 4 presentations scheduled. Financial, Commercial, and Operations Report by Costin Corneo, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and Elliot Hamlish, Chief Commercial Officer. National Network Strategy by Jennifer Mitchell, Executive Vice President for Strategy and Planning, and Nicole Busage, Vice President, Network Development. And our 3rd presentation is Capital Delivery Project Review by Jim Short, Acting Senior Vice President in Capital Delivery. And then finally, a review of the New Jersey Service Area Summer 25 preparations led by Gary Williams, Executive Vice President, Service and Delivery and Operations, and he'll be joined by Ryan Bernaski, Assistant Vice President, Infrastructure and Maintenance Construction, and Liam McQuaid, Vice President, Engineering Services. We'll proceed with the presentations in the order I just listed, and let's begin with the first presentation. And I'd like to invite Costin Corneo to present the financial report. Costin.
Thank you, Tony, and good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin today discussing our consolidated performance for the month of April year to date. Through April, we delivered an adjusted operating loss of $395.1 million. This operating loss performance is 8.2% better than our initial expectations due to strong revenue performance, partially offset by higher one-time item expense. Our revenue outperformed across all of our service lines, with our national network and Northeast regional routes driving most of the change. Through April, we were able to deploy 1% more capacity than planned, primarily driven by completion factor, which drove 2.2% increase in ridership across the network. Additionally, revenue was favorably impacted by improved ticket yield of 1.9%, driven by both the Acela and Northeast regional lines of business. Overall expenses, while higher than planned, were impacted by one-time items, including higher than expected employee benefit health claim costs and a one-time impact of an unexpected lease settlement cost. We continue to manage our discretionary spend tightly across the board and adjust to the evolving environment to protect margins and cash flow. Our operational metrics are performing strongly compared to plan, with RASM, or revenue per available seat mile, better by 1.3%, and CASM, or cost per available seat mile, better by 0.4%. Turning to our year-to-date performance compared to prior year, April's adjusted operating loss is 25.5% better, bolstered by revenue growth and continued cost management. Revenue is strong across all service lines, and ticket revenue has grown 10.3% on increased capacity and a corresponding increase in ridership of 5.9%. Improvements in our ticket yield, specifically with Acela, is also driving additional improvement compared to last fiscal year. Shifting over to our expenses, we are continuing to manage our overall cost structure. We were able to outperform the labor and general inflation and keep expense growth to only 0.5%, despite an almost double-digit higher capacity deployment year over year. As a result of our cost controls, CASM, our unit cost, is 5.4% better than prior year, with lower spend in discretionary areas, including professional fees and employee-related expenses. On the capital front, our spend of $3 billion is higher than prior year by 52.7%, as we continue to advance our large-scale construction projects, including BMP Tunnel, and we continue to invest in our State of Good Repair program to ensure proper maintenance of our railroad infrastructure. Additionally, we continue our investment in refleeting efforts and ADA compliance across our stations and facilities. Now that we have discussed our consolidated business performance, I wanted to move to an overview of our two business segments, passenger operations and infrastructure. First, our passenger business, which includes our passenger train activities, remains strong and is performing 10.8% better than expected in the adjusted operating loss, driven by strong customer demand discussed previously. On the cost side, higher wages and benefits are offset by lower operations cost and other expenses. Operations cost improvement of $23.6 million is driven mostly by lower fuel rate and lower host railroad cost. Compared to prior year, adjusted operating loss is 30.7% better. We are continuing to accelerate our financial results in this core segment and remain confident in our ability to deliver an adjusted operating profit for our passenger business by the end of fiscal year 2028. Now, over to our infrastructure business, which manages our rail network and real estate assets. This segment has seen tremendous amount of investment and growth over the last few years and has fluctuating operating results driven by cattle portfolio size and funding at any given time. The year-to-date adjusted operating loss of $118.4 million is mostly in line with plan, a slightly weaker revenue performance is offset by improved expenses, specifically in the salary and wages line. Compared to prior year, the infrastructure business has improved 9.9%. Moving over to our service line results, our profitable Northeast Corridor is performing strongly and delivered an adjusted operating income of $187.3 million with an operating margin of 21.2%. Compared to our plan, results are favorable by $23.6 million or 14.4%. Revenue is keeping pace in the NEC despite lower capacity driven by new Acela train set delays. Ridership and frequencies were above plan with our Northeast Regional service, which helped to offset the impact of those delays. Strong yield in both Acela and Northeast Regional helped to drive improved revenue performance. While we continue to advance our cost containment efforts, the NEC service line was negatively impacted by a one-time expense, which is driving unfavorable results in the chasm by 1.4 cents or 5.1%. Shifting now over to our national network and specifically our state-supported business. The adjusted operating loss for this service line is unfavorable to plan by 12.1% and is impacted by the timing of state contract executions as well as favorable ticket revenue, which results in lower subsidies from our state partners. These contracts are expected to close in the third quarter and the revenue to be recognized later this year. Overall costs are flat to plan, with savings in materials and train operations costs offsetting increased cost pressures in benefits. Finally, our long-distance service line has a favorable operating loss to plan of $10 million or 2.6%. Capacity increases are driving higher ridership across the network, though ticket yield is slightly down compared to plan. We are seeing strength in multiple routes, including the Empire Builder, Lakeshore Limited, and Crescent. Costs are performing better than planned by 0.3%, mostly due to lower labor costs, partially offset by higher benefit costs. Of note is that our long-distance network operation is mandated by Congress, and the operating loss is fully funded annually. Those funds are not recognized as revenue, but as owner's equity on the balance sheet under GAAP rules, thus driving a negative result on our profit and loss statement. Finally, looking at our capital compared to plan, spend of $3 billion is $617 million lower, largely due to delay in our refleeting efforts around Acela and Aero train sets. We do expect that the majority of this spend will still be completed within fiscal year 2025. Additional delays within bridges and tunnels, specifically the East River Tunnel, have pushed spend out of fiscal year 2025 and into 2026. Certain other projects have been impacted by funding timing. We continue to review and adjust our forecasted capital spend around our workforce and supplier base to maintain our cash balances while staying in alignment with our 5-year capital goal. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elliot.
Great. Thanks very much, Costin. As mentioned earlier, my name is Elliot Hamlish, Chief Commercial Officer at Amtrak. And we'll spend a few minutes discussing our ridership. April year-to-date ridership levels are favorable to same time last year by 5.9% and to plan by 2.2%. Northeast Regional quick turns and creative commercial tactics helped to offset Acela capacity constraints, which boosted ridership. Fiscal year to date, April, Northeast Regional ridership rose 3.8% versus plan, while Acela ridership declined 5.4%. Year over year, NER ridership increased by roughly 11%, with Acela down roughly 2%. Turning to our state-supported service line, core demand has been strong, powered by the Empire service at 5.1% year over year, the Pacific Surfliner at 10.1% year over year, Cascades at 16.3% year over year, and Borealis at 27.7% versus plan. The delayed East River Tunnel outage supported ridership gains in New York, but the Horizon Fleet outage in late March interrupted growth. Cascades, which had grown 16.3% year over year, saw a 4.5% decline in April, mainly due to Horizon Fleet issues. Lastly, our long-distance service line. Deployment of additional coach and sleeper capacity across the long-distance network, Silver Meteor, 29% year over year, Cardinal, 21% year over year, the California Zephyr, 11.8% year over year, the Southwest Chief, 31.4% year over year, the Texas Eagle, 37.9% year over year, the Sunset Limited at 28.8% year over year, and lastly, the Coast Starlight at 22.6%, all contributed to boosted ridership on long distance. With that, I will hand it over to Gary Williams, our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, to share an update on our customer on-time performance.
All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. As you can see by our customer on-time performance year to date, we're behind goal in every service but long distance, where we are on goal. We're close on state services, but have some distance to close on the Northeast Corridor. The Northeast Corridor, our challenges continue to be the legacy Acela fleet and the infrastructure reliability. A lot of work going on in both areas, and of course, our new next-gen fleet that will turn those around. On the state services side, we have some good things to talk about. Bright spots, Capital Corridor is at 91%, and Pacific Surfliner at 86%. Long distance, while we've struggled across many routes, the Crescent, with the help of our host, the NS, continues to perform well at 78%. Now, we did see a upturn in our performance in March and April. Several initiatives that came to fruition that helped the performance. April, we actually finished above goal or at goal with every service except for long distance. We were 2 below goal on the long distance side. Again, on the Northeast Corridor, our challenges continue to be the legacy Acela and the infrastructure. Thank you.
Now for an update on our Customer Satisfaction Index, or CSI. At the end of April, fiscal year 25, our aggregate CSI score stood at 78.4, which trailed our year-to-date goal by roughly 0.5 points. April was the best month of the fiscal year to date, significantly closing the gap to our fiscal year goal, which stood a full point below goal as of the end of March. Key drivers to April performance included OTP, on-time performance improvements on the Northeast Regional, which drove a 3.4 point overperformance versus goal. Acela OTP was strong as well, driving a 0.9 point overachievement versus goal. OTP was strong on many of our state-supported routes as well, with the service line overperforming by 2.1 points. The Empire service had a particularly positive impact, scoring 5 points above goal with improved OTP. Lastly, our long-distance routes exceeded goal by 1.9 points, led by the Crescent, Coast Starlight, and Palmetto. Overall, we're quite pleased with the performance improvements we saw in April and continue to partner closely cross-functionally to drive gains in on-time performance and other key contributors to customer satisfaction. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jennifer Mitchell, our EVP of Strategy and Planning, to walk through an update on our host railroad responsible delays.
Thank you, Elliot. Let's see. And it was a mixed bag with the host railroad responsibility or responsible delays. Host responsible delays during the second quarter of fiscal year 2025 decreased for state-supported services, but increased for long-distance services against our plan in the previous year. But total year-to-date delays through April remain ahead of our annual plan and the previous year. For the state-supported service, this was favorable to plan by 10 points year over year and 8 points for the second quarter. Year-to-date through April, it was favorable to plan and year over year by 6 points. For the services that improved, 10 out of 16 had reduced delays compared to FY24 second quarter, and 8 had reduced delays compared to FY24 year-to-date, led by the Hiawatha with 27 points year over year, the Vermonter with a 30-point improvement year over year, and Cascades with a 13-point improvement year over year. For the services that saw worse increased delays, that include 6 services and 8 services had increased delays, led by the Missouri River Runner with 37-point decrease compared year over year, the Lincoln, Missouri service, and the Downeaster. Our long-distance service line was unfavorable to plan by 4 points and at the same level year over year in quarter 2. Year to date through April, it was unfavorable to plan by 2 points and at the same level for year over year. For services that improved, we had 6 that had reduced delays compared to second quarter of FY24, and 5 had reduced delays compared to FY24 year to date. These were led by the Crescent with a 28-point improvement year over year, and the California Zephyr with a 10-point improvement year over year. For services that saw increased delays, these were led by the Texas Eagle with 28 points year over year, the City of New Orleans with 9 points year over year, and the Cardinal with a 17-point decrease year over year. Since the Capital and the Silver Star were replaced by the Floridian, we cannot make an exact comparison year over year. However, the delays for the Floridian in the second quarter of FY25 are higher than what we saw for the Capital and Silver Star delays in the second quarter of FY24. We saw increased CSX freight train interference on the Capital portion, and our Silver Star portions were the primary factors. The Sunset Limited was unchanged. And just a few noteworthy points, we did see worsened performance out of CSX. They've been struggling, but in April, the year-over-year delays were lower for the first month since September. The Floridian, which combined those two long-distance routes, have identified areas of improvement, but also recognized that heat orders provided an additional challenge in the spring and the summer. The auto train had elevated delays this fiscal year in a significant part due to major track work projects that impacted all of our I-95 corridor trains. In the improved column, we saw Norfolk Southern, where delays dropped significantly beginning in August, bottoming in November, and while they've been increasing since, they are significantly reduced year over year. This pattern is evident on many of the Amtrak services that operated on NS, and most notably on the Crescent. And then finally, we saw improved performance on with Union Pacific. The Sunset performance has significantly improved since September 2023, with monthly 2025 improvements improved year over year. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Elliot.
I promised the final Elliott update of the day. All right, closing out this portion of the presentation, we will discuss train consist fulfillment. For those unfamiliar, consist fulfillment measures how often we are operating trains with the planned consists. The highest fulfillment is on the Northeast Corridor, where recent service plan changes are helping to improve performance. Consist fulfillment is a mixed narrative for our state-supported routes. In the East, substitution of locomotives for aging and unreliable cab cars, drives down the Downeaster and thus an otherwise high-performing portfolio of state-supported routes. In the Midwest, poor fulfillment is driven by regular substitution of venture equipment. Recent removal of Horizon equipment will put further strain on this region, but may improve fulfillment as there are limited opportunities for replacement equipment for ventures. On Western routes, we have multiple equipment types often operating on the same routes. With service expansion, fleets are becoming more constrained and swaps are common. Lastly, most long-distance variance is driven by fleet types with fewer than 30 units, resulting in more opportunity for day-to-day variation from planned consists. That concludes this portion of our presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Mitchell and Nicole Busich for an update on our national network strategy. Thank you.
And I am going to turn it over to Nicole, our Vice President for Network Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm excited to talk to you all today about our national network growth strategy. Jennifer introduced me, Nicole Busich, Vice President of Network Development, and my team is responsible for facilitating our network expansion across the country. So I'll start by talking about the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program, which was established in May of 2022, and it created a foundational framework for identifying, developing, and funding new and improved intercity rail services. In December of 2023, FRA announced the corridors that were selected into the first round of the Corridor ID program. And it included new intercity corridors, new high-speed corridors, extensions of existing routes, and enhancements to the existing services that we run. And the enhancements could include additional stations, increasing the speed of our existing service, or adding additional trains each day, adding additional frequencies. And more than half of the Corridor ID awards were new corridors. There are 3 steps in FRA's Corridor ID program. Step 1 is a scoping step, and that's where we develop the scope, schedule, and budget for the key second step, which is the service development plan. And this is the detailed technical analysis that is done to develop service information, frequencies, infrastructure needs, costs. And once you achieve that service development plan step, and that is approved by FRA, you would move into step 3, which is the preliminary engineering and NEPA, the environmental analysis that would be required. And most of the corridors have been obligated for step 1. Amtrak was selected for 3 Corridor ID awards. 2 are long distance focused to bring our Cardinal and Sunset Limited to daily service. And the third is the Amtrak to Long Island corridor. And we've completed step 1 for all 3 corridors and are looking forward to obligation for step 2 so we can begin the service development plans. And I'll walk through each of these in a little bit more detail. The long-distance Sunset Limited route runs between Los Angeles and New Orleans, and it operates 3 days a week in each direction. The Daily Sunset project would evaluate increasing that service to daily. And we will also work with our host railroad partner, Union Pacific, and the Federal Railroad Administration to identify the infrastructure improvements along the corridor, not only to bring our service to daily, but also to assess restoring service through downtown Phoenix. The Cardinal route, which runs from New York City to Chicago and back, also runs 3 times a week. And this project would, similar to the Sunset Limited, would evaluate increasing that service to daily. So the 13 other routes that we operate on the long distance service line provide daily services, and that allows for better scheduling opportunities for our customers. And as a result, they have stronger ridership. So as a comparison, the Daily Capital Limited route, which runs between Washington, D.C. and Chicago, has 3 times more riders than the Cardinal. And the third of our Corridor ID awards, the Amtrak to Long Island project, proposes the extension of 3 daily Northeast regional trains. And these are the trains that run between Washington, D.C. and New York City. And they would be extended to Ronkonkoma, Long Island, with stops in Jamaica and Hicksville. And this would provide stops in 3 counties, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk counties, with service to 2 major airports, JFK International Airport and the Islip MacArthur Airport, which is just south of the Ronkonkoma station. This project would be evaluated in partnership with MTA Long Island Railroad and New York State DOT. Following the success of the recent Borealis service launch and the expanded Winter Park Express service, there are several very exciting expansions on the near horizon. So I'll start with talking about the Borealis service. We launched that in May of 2024 between Chicago and Minneapolis-St. Paul. And the route and the service continues to outpace our ridership and revenue forecasts. And building on this success, we're excited about the other key opportunities that are out there to grow our ridership and revenue across the system. So in the near term, we have several different opportunities, a combination of new service, existing corridor extensions, and additional frequencies on existing routes. So last month, we were thrilled to announce the new Amtrak Mardi Gras service, which will run between New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mobile, Alabama, with 2 daily round trips, and we're looking forward to starting the service later this summer. This new state-supported service is in partnership with the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and the city of Mobile, the host railroads, CSX and Norfolk Southern, and we are working closely with the Southern Rail Commission to launch this service. We're also working with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority to extend 2 daily Northeast regional round trips from its current terminus in Roanoke, Virginia, approximately 35 miles southwest to Christiansburg, Virginia. And this initiative is moving very quickly thanks to an agreement between VRPA and Norfolk Southern with the goal of starting service in late 2026, early 2027. So also on the horizon are additional frequencies to our existing routes. We're coordinating with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and Norfolk Southern to increase the Pennsylvanian service. That's a service that runs between New York City, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh from 1 daily round trip to 2. And that is targeted for fall of 2028. And in North Carolina, we're working with North Carolina Department of Transportation to increase the Piedmont service from 4 to 5 round trips between Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina. In the central region, we're working with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to increase the Hiawatha service from 7 to 8 round trips between Chicago and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And, go back. And then in California, on the West Coast, we're working with the state and the 3 joint power authorities to add frequencies on all 3 routes, the Capitol Corridor, San Joaquin's, and Pacific Surfliner. And there's more. There are several other key growth opportunities across the country. So I mentioned earlier the Winter Park Express, and this past season, we had record ridership, and that was thanks to an earlier start of the seasonal service. We added frequencies, and we extended the service that runs between Denver and the Winter Park Express, and we extended that to Fraser, Colorado. And we are looking at the opportunity to build on the success, as the state of Colorado looks to implement year-round service, the Mountain Rail service, which would run between Denver and Craig, Colorado. And they are also looking at the Front Range service, which would operate between Denver and Fort Collins, Colorado. In Massachusetts, we're working closely with the state and CSX to advance the inland route service, and this would extend two daily round trips of the Amtrak Hartford shuttle. Which currently runs between New Haven and Springfield, and those would be routed to serve Boston directly through Worcester. And lastly, in Massachusetts, we're working, in the Corridor ID program, we're working closely with Wisconsin Department of Transportation, where they are leading an effort that would extend the successful Hiawatha service, which now runs from Chicago to Milwaukee. And they're working on the proposal to extend that through Madison, Eau Claire, and the Twin Cities. And more recently, we've been working with Wisconsin DOT and our host railroad partners to advance a first phase of that, with potentially advancing 2 daily round trips to Madison, Wisconsin. So I wanted to thank you all. There's a lot of exciting new service on the horizon, and I hope you're excited as I am to bring more trains to more people and more places across the country. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'm Jim Short. I'm the acting senior vice president for capital delivery, and excited to share with you what we're doing in capital delivery as we finally get these major construction projects off the ground. I do want to start with a overview, though, of our funding. The old days were annual grant. We had annual grant funding. We had a few other sources of funding. But now we have funding from IIJA, which is really what enabled all of this massive construction to take place. So I want to talk just briefly about the 3 buckets of money that we rely on to carry out our construction program here in capital delivery. Starting on the left is our annual grant program, and that's used for our train operations, our maintenance, and some infrastructure improvements. And you can see in FY25, that allocation to Amtrak was at $2.4 billion. The next bucket of money is part of the IIJA, and that is the supplemental funding, which was really allocated for our fleet acquisition programs, our facilities to support those fleets, and our accessibility and DT programs. And I'll be talking about some of those specific projects in a few moments. That was about $21 billion total to Amtrak. There's about $17 billion of that has been obligated, with about another $4 billion that has not yet been obligated of the supplemental. The final bucket is the FRA discretionary, and this is a competition essentially funded by project. Each individual project stands on its own merit, and they are typically fed-state partnerships. They can be CRISI grants. Currently, we have $7.4 billion that's obligated, and another $4.3 billion that we are looking to get obligated to continue to support the capital program that we've planned for. As Costin mentioned in his remarks, this is the largest capital program in Amtrak history. And this is at the Amtrak level. This is not just capital delivery, but you can see here that typically, back before IIJA, the company was about $2.2 billion in total capital spend. In FY24, we spent almost $4.4 billion as that influx of IIJA started to take hold and construction projects started to get executed, targeting almost $6.8 billion for FY25. And so it's been quite a year for us. The Amtrak spend in FY24 was $4.4 billion, and that was an Amtrak record, and we're going to break that record this year. I'm going to move on to some updates of some of our major projects, and this is where it gets exciting for me as a construction person is what are we doing? We're building. We're absolutely building some major infrastructure projects out there. They're off the drawing boards. Things are happening in the field. And this is where it gets exciting as a construction person. So I'm going to give you about 5 pages here of some of our larger projects, and I'll just walk through them. The Porter North Bridge project is in New Jersey. This is a partnership with New Jersey Transit to replace a century-old movable bridge with a modern high-level fixed span approach. The schedule for this project, we started this job in 2022. The current completion schedule is 2027. It's $2.2 billion, and this primary funding source is the FRA discretionary bucket that I talked about earlier. This is a great news story with New Jersey Transit. This job is on time and on budget. It's 83% complete. We've worked over 2.1 million hours on the project. That's how we count things in construction. The third and final arch were delivered and placed in late February. Most of the civil work is complete. Other track and other systems are being installed with track cutovers planned for early 2026. If you live in Northeast Quarter, you can just see the construction happening right out the window as you go by. Very exciting to watch projects like this. Connecticut River Bridge. This is the complete replacement of an existing 117-year-old bridge in Connecticut. I was just up there a couple of weeks ago to visit the project team, and the progress is just amazing what they're doing up there. Schedule is 2024 to 2031. It's a long project, very challenging, $1.3 billion program. Primary funding source is FRA discretionary. What's happening up there is the contractor is progressing the initial work with the access roads, temporary trestles, advancing the new bridge structure steel. We opened a new fishing pier at Eagle Landing Park up there as part of the project scope. This project is spending about $30 million a month. You just think about that. That's a tremendous amount, but that's a pretty good amount for an infrastructure project. So full blast, the team's doing a great job up there. The project in New Jersey, New York is actually led by the Gateway Development Commission as project sponsor. We provide support, and as the future owner operator, we will be supporting the infrastructure and systems elements of the project, the track, the catenary, and those kinds as part of a future package. The first package is the civil works to get the tunnels done. This project also includes the rehabilitation of the existing North River tunnels as part of its overall scope. Another very long project, 2023 to 2038, $16 billion is the total value of this program. Its primary funding source is FTA and FRA discretionary, along with some annual grant contribution. So a lot of progress. 5 of 10 project contracts are currently in construction. One of those projects is the Hudson Yard concrete casing, number 3, which Amtrak is leading that particular construction package. And that's nearly 50% complete. It is on schedule and on budget. Overall, the program is on schedule at this time. Finally, I'll highlight the East River Tunnels project in New York. It was mentioned in the previous remarks, but this is an amazing project to replace and reconstruct 2 sandy damaged tunnels. And they will be rehabilitated from end to end. It's a lot of work. Demolition of the existing tunnel systems, repairs to liners, reconstruction of bench walls, upgrading from the current ballasted track to a direct fixation track, which requires a lot less maintenance down the road and better ride quality. We'll be replacing our signal, traction power, fire life safety upgrades. This is a big job also. We're starting it within the next week or so. We've actually done enabling works in 2024, and now we're going to be going on with the outage And the work that will be required to rehabilitate these tunnels. We're taking one tunnel out at a time, and we're taking both out at a time. We recognize the impact to the traveling public when we do a long-term outage. So that's this construction sequence that has been agreed in New York. This is $1.6 billion. It's a very large project. Another one, primary funding source is FRA discretionary funds. There's cost-sharing agreements in place between the New York MTA and New Jersey Transit and Amtrak on how this project will be executed. I want to highlight some of our major maintenance facilities that are required to support our new fleet. I'll talk about our new fleet in just a moment, but when you bring a new fleet, you have to have new maintenance facilities to accommodate that new fleet and the maintenance required on that equipment. So starting with Ivy City, that's here in Washington, D.C. We started construction just a few months ago. Completion is 2028. That's the largest of these at $700 million. This is a design build. That's a different alternative delivery strategy than what we've employed here at Amtrak previously. And more traditional is you design the job, then you bid it, and then you construct it. A design build merges that together, and it's a very common approach in the construction industry. I won't read the rest of these, but we're at Pincoach Yard in Pennsylvania. It's under construction. King Street Yard in Seattle, Southampton Yard in Boston. And again, those are all design build with different completion dates. And those dates are aligned to support the delivery of the train sets that I'll be talking about in the fleet in just a few moments. I didn't mention the Sunnyside Yard in Queens. That project is currently in the procurement phase, which is why I didn't list it on the slide, but it is what we call one of our 5 level 1 maintenance facilities. I'm going to move to expanding our fleet. So next gen Acela, you heard Gary talk about the challenges of the existing Acela fleet, and we need to replace those with these new train sets. Really important. There's been a lot of work by a lot of folks over a number of years to bring this project to completion. We are so close to revenue service. We're very excited to see this new train set. Some of us have ridden the prototypes in different segments of the corridor. Really exciting, beautiful trains, very smooth operation. Just really excited to see these happening. Some of the highlights here, qualification testing, we finished in September of 2024. Pre-revenue testing on our production train sets was completed in January. The dynamic test runs for pre-commissioning are underway. Dress rehearsals are scheduled. These are where we actually load the trains fully with passengers to do a full load test, although there's believe it or not, gravel and sand in bags on the floors of the prototype cars to simulate the loads. But we were going to a dress rehearsal phase where they're actually passengers to simulate a full passenger load. And we're still targeting initial revenue launch spring 2025. Moving on to the Aero program, you may have heard previously this program referred to as ICT or intercity train sets. We renamed this fleet quite a while ago to Aero. I wanted to mention that. Another big fleet replacement program really aimed at improving the customer experience with our amenities, food service, restrooms, huge improvement over our current Northeast regional trains. This is going to go on many of our routes, including the Northeast Regional. These trains are going to go on. You can see Empire, New Haven, Carolinian, many routes that these Aero train sets will be put into service. I also want to note the manufacturer of these train sets is primarily in Sacramento, California, and Lexington, North Carolina, with our supply chain reaching out to over 100 suppliers in 31 states. Really important to us, the Buy America provisions and the Aero program has really done a great job with this. Just a quick update on the production side. It's ongoing. There are 97 coaches and 11 locomotives currently in production. There's 44 vehicles in final assembly and 5 in testing. Dynamic testing started in September 2025 for the Cascades route. That'll be the first route to launch, and that will be in 2026. Final trains enter service in 2031, 2032 timeframe. I don't have a slide on the long distance fleet program. That's another one of our fleet programs, but that program is in active procurement at this moment, so we will not discuss it in this particular venue. Switching gears to our capital spend and how are we doing? So we focus on 2 things in capital programs. One is the overall life of project budget, which are the figures I showed you on the slides previously, like 1.6 billion for East River tunnels. We also focus on our annual operating plan because that's the funding stack in the annual grants in particular. So we focused on our AOP, our annual operating plan, and how are we doing? We started the year with a plan of $5.1 billion. Through March, we're slightly behind that plan, but we are forecasting that we will reach about $4.4 billion in spend just in capital delivery by the end of September 2025. The way our metrics work, we also measure pulling the contingency and the finance cost out of that to see the real cost planning and expenditure. And right now we are forecasting to do about 6.5% under plan at the end of September, which is really great performance as you compare that to previous capital spends here in what used to be a different department. On the right side of the page is a table that gives you more detail on the breakdown. You can study that at your leisure in terms of how we manage the department and how we're organized and hold our teams accountable for the delivery of their capital program. I'm going to spend just a few minutes here on cost efficiencies. We are very, very focused on improving the cost efficiency and capital delivery as a department, and Amtrak is as well, but we have a very large spend. And so when we can move that needle, that has a big impact on our ability to save money. So our strategy is fourfold: scope refinement, identifying the scope that is absolutely required for safety and well operations. 2, value engineering. What cost reductions can we take out to save money on a project? I'll have some examples of those in just a moment. Track access. Anytime you're in an operating environment, whether it's an airport or a railroad, the amount of time that you can get on the track to do productive work is really, really important. And to make the most of that, we're studying how to be more efficient about doing that. I have a slide on that. And then the risk allocation. Risk allocation has to do with the alternative delivery strategies I mentioned earlier. How do we do more of a risk sharing mechanism with some of our construction contracts? A couple of examples here of value engineering that we are working on. Some are farther advanced than others. But on the left is the dock bridge. This is a project that, we saw an opportunity to take the original scope of the job and do a value engineering effort. And right now we're targeting driving out $140 million out of the life of project estimate for that project. The BNP tunnel program in Baltimore, our value engineering efforts so far have identified $1.7 billion in savings against what was the last roll-up of the estimate after we got contractor bids. Susquehanna River Bridge is another one that is undergoing different design alternative considerations because we have some cost pressures on the project as it relates to the budget. So we are looking for some savings. The savings are under development at this time. This is the area I mentioned a moment ago about enhancing track access. This is a complicated equation of making the best out of available track time. We're working with our Gary Williams and our SD&O department. This is really, really an opportunity for us to improve the forecasting of what people do need, where and when, and then balancing it with the availability of those resources that are in actually Gary's organization. Looking at how we access our projects for daylight or overnight work windows, and sometimes we do have to do long-term outages. That's what we don't want to do if we can avoid it, but sometimes it makes sense. You just take the track out of service, get it done, put it back in service, and move on. So this initiative is in development. We really expect some great efficiencies to come out of this. Switch gears to a quick update on World Cup. This sounds like a really long way away. It's a year away, but the planning work is really, really important to get this right. And so we have some folks working on this. So by the numbers, World Cup 2026 is 39 days, 48 teams, 11 cities, 1.5 million attendees will watch a match at one of the three stadiums over the 39 days. 20% of those tournaments will be played in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia. And 60 to 85% of those fans will likely move between the host cities by means other than cars. That's going to be a lot of us, and so we need to be prepared for that. So what are we doing? We're going to continue our planned work on our major programs. We don't see a disruption to our major program activities that I described a few moments ago. East River Tunnel, Susquehanna River Bridge, the BMP Tunnel Program. But some of the items around the World Cup events will have to be restricted. We're just not going to be able to take outages and impact service and move this volume of passengers to get them to where they want to go to watch the World Cup. Key here is to understand the needs of our commuter partners as well, because there's a lot of other agencies that are involved in these cities that we're going to be operating in. So there's a lot of coordination externally with the commuter partners, but also internally with Gary Williams' team, the Amtrak Police Department, corporate communication, and others to make sure we're successful at this. So finally, in conclusion, I hope what you just heard is we are expanding our fleet and our infrastructure of building at a scale never before seen in Amtrak. We have the right team of people in place to continue to drive those projects to completion safely, on time, on budget, and we'll continue to work with our partners and our stakeholders to do just that. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Gary Williams.
Thank you. Hi, hello again. Gary Williams, and I am responsible for Amtrak service delivery and operations. I do want to add that all that fantastic work that Jim and his team are doing, I didn't mention, does create challenges when we're trying to run trains on time. But I will say that with the unprecedented amount of work as we go through this together, we are learning every day, and I think getting better at adjusting and learning how to run trains on time around all this work. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about, I think as most of you are aware, we had a tough summer last year on the New Jersey Transit territory. Both New Jersey Transit and Amtrak experienced multiple catastrophic service disruptions to our customers. That's New Jersey Transit customers and Amtrak. We did not deliver the service to them that they deserve. I might add that these incidents then led to multiple meetings with Governor Murphy, and well, a great gentleman to be around, not under those circumstances. The NJT teams and Amtrak teams have worked very closely together to identify potential causes and develop mitigations. And I've got two individuals here that William McQuad, VP of Engineering Services, and Ryan Bernaski, our AVP of Maintenance, who are going to talk about a lot of the work that we have done and several processes that we have enhanced on the Amtrak side to make sure that we don't have a reoccurrence of last summer and we provide both Amtrak and NJT customers with the service that they so deserve. All right.
Good afternoon. As Gary mentioned, I'm Lee McQuarrie. I'm the Vice President for Engineering Services with Amtrak. And I'll start by giving a brief look back into the summer season of 2024. Gary acknowledges that was a challenging season for the Northeast Corridor. It brought us high levels of attention and scrutiny. And Amtrak's assets suffered, and it became evident that we had some challenges with our electric traction and assets, and we had some power failures which were significant and adversely impacted our passengers. We've seen challenges with our New Jersey Transit colleagues. Their pantograph suffered reliability issues, and we had some challenges with assets that were neither owned by New Jersey Transit nor Amtrak, but they did have an impact on the service. We continue to respond to media interest in what we're doing for summer preparedness in 2025, both from elected officials, from the media, and other interested parties. So we thought it appropriate to give you an overview of what it is that we've been working on, and try to build some confidence that we're not just sitting there expecting the same again. So what have we done? We've taken a proactive approach to attempting to modernise how we address the summer season. We've had support from our FRA colleagues and the New Jersey Transit team, and we collaborated to create a technical committee. What we started to do was break down the previous failure instance that we had, and then start to think beyond the way that we've always done things. So we instigated 2 separate technical reviews from independent companies who have given us some good feedback in terms of where we may look to improve the robustness of our OCS, or overhead catenary, and our rolling stock system in the way that they interact with each other. We also collaborated internally, and internationally. So we've looked outside of just Amtrak, and we've looked to see what other railroads within the United States and beyond do in preparation for summer, acknowledging that we don't know everything, but we do our damnedest to look at what best practice is and how we can apply that to Amtrak. And we've increased our capital spending to improve our asset reliability, which Ryan will touch on in just a second.
Good afternoon, I'm Ryan Panaski. Start with the investment in, next slide, I need to click it, sorry. Fiscal year 24, we spent about $12 million on substation and catenary assets, renewing those. We're on pace to more than double that this year. Spent about 15 so far. We're on target for 40 million spend this year. We've modernized our approach since last summer. We've incorporated some aerial inspection technologies. We've got a helicopter, we've got drone flights that come with high resolution cameras. We can see down to a cotter key that's backed out. We can see a nut that's backed off a couple turns. We can see all those things now that we couldn't see from the ground last year. So we've been hitting those hard, responding to those as they come in, and we'll continue that. As I said, that has greatly increased our ability to see failure points before they manifest themselves in a service disruption. That's led us to about 9,500 components so far that have been replaced over the course of the last year, from tapping inspections, outriding the railroad, hangers, clips, things we found that are broken, compromised, that we've been able to replace. On top of that, we've replaced 3.5 miles of catenary wire with wholesale renewal in large chunks in key areas of the infrastructure where we see heavy volume, choke points on the infrastructure. We've wholesale renewed those on the catenary side. We've also had some reliability improvements on our substation side. We are getting close to commissioning the new control room for sub 42, which was a major issue last year in Hackensack. That was a source of delays. We've run new cables under the rivers, so we've got enhanced reliability of power to and from Penn Station, both on the Sunnyside side and into New Jersey. Sub 42 should be commissioned in early July, late June. So that is on pace to be done. As Liam said, we looked outside for approach to summer preparedness. We've got some enhancements that I'll talk about in the next couple slides. The other thing we've developed is more of a condition and criticality based priority system. So we're targeting our resources, our funding, our people, our track usage in the right areas that align to our operating patterns and where we see high volumes. And I'll let Liam talk a little bit about that.
So Ryan mentioned that we're attempting to change or rethink how we use our people, our money, and our time on track. So we've been working to develop what we're calling a renewal and maintenance prioritization index. The thinking behind that is that we take a structured approach to and use data to determine where we want to spend our money and where we want to send our people to make sure that we maximize the impact that we can have each and every time we're out on the system. So this acknowledges that not all assets on the system are equal, and that age is not the only driver that we should be thinking about when it comes to how we plan to renew our assets. So how the ramp index works, we assign a combined score for each track section or interlocking. So that's the pieces where trains move between one track and the other, and we integrate those two key components. We consider condition, so an aggregated score representing the overall condition of assets within a block or interlocking based on an approved condition assessment framework that's been developed, in some part using international best practices, but also a collaboration between our engineering teams and our maintenance teams. With that, we've also developed a criticality index. So it's a score reflecting the asset's criticality based on its operational impact should something fail or not be fully available. And when we combine the two of these components, we start to understand where a failure on the network can have the most impact to our passengers. And our attempt has been to target these areas and prioritise these areas with our initial approach to summer prep so that we see less failures on the system this year. So as I mentioned, for summer 25, we've focused our efforts in developing the criticality scores for each track segment and the interlocking along the Northeast Corridor. So we can say with some comfort, we've now concluded Boston to Washington and out on the Harrisburg lines. So we have a documented understanding of where our most critical assets are. I think if you speak to our good technical people and our subject matter experts, they could say with some confidence where they thought those areas were. The big step forward we've had is that we've now got that documented and we can use that to determine where we spend our inspection, our maintenance and our capital renewal focuses. So I've touched on it already, but some key factors that influence our asset criticality include traffic volume, so how many trains pass across the network in any one day. It's not just about how many trains, it's about what does that train movement do. So in some instances, it's a move that gets you from one yard or one depot out onto the system or back in. And those assets can be just as critical as a high-speed crossover somewhere between Washington and Philadelphia. We think about redundancy, and when we mention redundancy, we're talking about, is there an alternative route? So do we have a single point of failure that can choke the train system? So when we start to understand that, we then start to, again, apply more focus to the level of criticality that asset has to the system. What's the service impact? We know, we experienced it last year, that New Jersey has a high level of service impact should we get a component failure, and we're applying that same methodology and that same thinking process across the entirety of the network. And then we think about the network role. So it's not just about a failure on the Northeast Corridor itself. Is there areas out on the Harrisburg line, for instance, that if an asset fails, it pulls a delay out onto the Northeast Corridor or vice versa? So trying to think about our system as a system and not just thinking about it as New Jersey to New York to Connecticut. Think about the Northeast Corridor in its entirety and how do we best position ourselves to walk into the summer in a good, able to perform. So on that, Ryan's going to touch on some of the summer preparedness that we've been doing.
The items on the right are the content of our summer preparation program. In a lot of ways, those were existing procedures, existing protocols that we've pulled together into a comprehensive program. We've modified some of them for things that, specific to summer preparation, things you should look at coming out of the winter. Items we've identified that are, at high risk for when temperatures change, they might fail. So there's some enhanced focus on specific areas in these procedures that we've pulled into a new engineering practice for summer preparation. We are currently in the process of executing that now. We are applying the ramp that Liam just mentioned. We're looking at those highly critical locations and types of components first, working our way through that down the list as we go. So this covers everything from track assets to signal assets to bridge and building assets to the electric traction assets that we had issues with last year. This is not a one-time thing. A lot of items in here are going to need to be repeated throughout the year. So we have an ongoing protocol through the year to look at. Going into the summer, we look at them, but then as some of them down to a daily basis, depending on usage and operating model, we need to get down and down on the ground and look at, observe, test, verify. So this will go on for the next month or so to finish until the end of May. And then continuing through the summer, some of these items will continue. And equally as important as developing this, we've developed a new way to document it. We've not necessarily tracked summer preparation the way we did winter prep. So that is a new procedure that we've pulled together, just making sure that we are comprehensively documenting it, making sure everybody's implementing it in the same way across the system, from the West Coast to the Central to the Northeast corridor. And then on the OCS side, we do have some instrumentation. So we have a geometry card that looks specifically at the wire. We've established some new protocols for dealing with those items when we get deviant conditions, whether that's stagger of the wire, whether that's height of the wire. We've identified some new interventions, some new thresholds. So when that car runs, roughly monthly, we'll get reports. We can start intervening earlier before we see some of the items we saw last summer. We've got some, as I said, some new thresholds that get down to tighter maintenance limits, and we'll see if that wire is starting to sag and drift, which is some of the items we saw last year. And we now have a protocol for intervening earlier and ultimately identifying the service disruptions that we saw last year.
Yeah, so just a brief recap on what we've been talking about. So preparations have been undertaken for summer 2025. We're not just starting now. These preparations have been ongoing since October, November time last year. So it's given ourselves as much opportunity to prepare for summer 25 as we possibly can. And we're confident that we should be set up for an improved season. Just recapping, we tripled our FY24 investments, so now spending somewhere in the region of $40 million, or forecasting to by the end of financial year 2025. We've reviewed and applied lessons learned from how we prepared for summer 24. And again, I mentioned the fact that we've looked outside of Amtrak and internationally to see how other railroads prepare for that. And we've called upon the support from experts in the field to try and help us build an asset that is more robust than some people may feel that we had last year. We've also implemented a risk-based approach to inspection, maintenance, asset renewals, and proactive deployment of our people during the summer season. So really thinking about how do we set ourselves up for success on a daily and weekly basis. And we've improved how we capture and use data to enable us to intervene prior to failures occurring. So off the back of that, that is the end of the presentation from Ryan and I. Thank you.
Hey, thank you to all for those presentations and very informative reports. Before we conclude, I'd like to open it up to any of the board members for any questions. Sure.
A question for Liam or Ryan, in terms of the work that you're doing right now, given the scope of data centers and electric vehicle infrastructure that's being built, are you facing challenges in terms of procurement of transformers, equipment, and materials to do what you're planning to do this summer?
So we have been working closely with our supply chain to understand what our future needs are and not just thinking about FY25 and actually starting to place orders for long lead time items like transformers. So we acknowledge that there are challenges in procuring them. And as we upturn the money that we spend in the electric traction and power space, we need to be thinking beyond just 25 and into those kind of 26, 27, 28. So yes, we are thinking beyond and thinking about how we procure.
Any other questions? Joel, please.
Yes, so this one's for Elliot. You mentioned that Acella's ridership is down 2% year over year. I'm presuming that is capacity driven, not demand driven. We only have 15 of our original Acellas still in service. By this time next year, my understanding is they are to be replaced by 24 new Acellas, each with 5% more capacity. So in total, if my math is correct, we're going to have double the capacity of what we have right now for Acela within the next 12 months. So I guess two questions for you. One is there, feel free to correct if any of my assumptions are incorrect. And secondly, if they are correct, are we confident that there is demand out there for us to double our number of passengers in Acela next year?
Sure, great. Thanks so much for the questions, Joel. So the short answer is your assumptions are generally all correct. The new next-gen Acela trains will increase overall capacity by 50% relative to today's capacity. And we are very confident that there's demand out there for the service. So we look forward to the day when we've got 28 train sets in service, which is what's intended at the end of the next-gen Acela fleet launch. And we look forward to welcoming the increased demand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably for Costin, maybe Elliot. Question about, I was glad to hear your explanation on the long distance network and how it doesn't meet the same close to profit level that we see on the NEC, but that we note that we're not able to book the revenue that we get from our general grant as part of that. So thank you for noting that. The question is, as we look forward, and Nicole talked about obviously some very short-term opportunities for expansion, but as we continue to look at the long-distance service study and look at longer-term potential for expansion, tell me a little bit about how we'll set ourselves up to be able to do that expansion, both on the rolling stock side, but also on the financial side as we look at trying to make this enterprise cost break even.
Thanks for the question, Ellen. I'll start, and maybe Elle, you can chime in on the future, but I'll start with the cost component. So the long distance network has a lot of opportunity for cost efficiency, especially as you think about the couplets, the layovers, the efficiency of materials, parts, and so on. We, in the next 5 years, do not have new fleet coming in on the long distance, but we will into the next decade. So that's where we're working towards opportunities of cost containment in the next 5 years on the degrading fleet age, and putting up in place efficiencies to be able to reduce the op loss early into the next decade. Maybe Elliot can address the expansion.
Yeah, I think what I'll mention in addition to what Costin shares, that we're working hard on the commercial side of the business to drive incremental demand as well, right? So sort of two pieces to the profitability equation. One is the cost containment that Costin mentioned. The other is what more, different, better can we do to drive incremental demand across our long distance routes. So we're working closely cross-functionally to do all and everything that we can across each of our routes to drive demand as we look for expansion opportunities as well.
So follow up on that. Is it fair to say that on the long distance network, as we look for expansion, that in places where there's a possibility of partnering with state supported routes, we'd have an easier path toward being able to make that expansion work?
I think that's a fair assumption.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. This concludes the meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Directors will be held on July 30th and 31st, 2025. And information on that meeting will be posted on amtrak.com. Again, I'd now conclude the public session and thank everyone for your participation. Have a great day. Thank you.